Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of Tilburg University, the Netherlands Network for Human Rights Research, and Studium Generale. Today, it's the 10th of December. That's International Human Rights Day. It's a day that commemorates that 77 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. Let me start by extending a special word of welcome to our Vice-Rector Magnificus, Professor Antoinette de Bond of Tilburg University, to our Dean of our law school, Professor Stephanie van Gulik, and to all faculty and representatives of our partner universities in the network, which consists of 13 universities across the Netherlands. In our keynote lecture today by Professor Conny Rijken, who I will introduce to you shortly. After that, we will be awarding the Max van der Stoel Human Rights Awards. So a very warm welcome to the jury members, to our guests, nominees, friends, and family who have joined us from across the country and beyond. And most importantly, a heartfelt welcome to our students. This award ceremony exists in a large part for you, to recognize your achievements, to celebrate your research, and to encourage the next generation of human rights scholars. Human rights are stewardship work. They are carried on from one generation to the next, and seeing so many of you here today affirms that this stewardship is in very capable hands. The theme of the 2025 International Human Rights Day is Human Rights Are Everyday Essentials. The High Commissioner for Human Rights has stressed that the enduring relevance of the Universal Declaration in these times of insecurity and uncertainty. Human rights are not abstract concepts, they are essential and attainable. Attainable because they begin with very small everyday choices and actions. And in that light, I am particularly happy today that we have the students of Amnesty International Tilburg in our midst. They are here today with their Right for Rights campaign. And for decades, as you no doubt know, such letter-writing campaigns have contributed to the release and improved treatments of individuals that face injustice around the world. And their campaign demonstrates that defending human rights starts with our everyday choices and collective action. By offering us the simple everyday opportunity to write a letter or a postcard using the power of words to help people that face injustice. So I encourage everyone here today that after our keynote and the prize ceremony to visit their stand below in the lobby, to pick up a pen and participate in this everyday essential act of solidarity. So let me now turn to today's program. The Max van der Stoel Human Rights Lecture and Award is one of the longest standing recognitions of human rights scholarship in the Netherlands. It is since 1995 that Tilburg Law School, later joined by the Netherlands Network of Human Rights Research, has honored the best PhD dissertation and the best master thesis in the field of human rights, and it continues to serve as an incentive for human rights scholarship. At the center of today's event stands the legacy of Max van der Stoel, after whom we named this award. His career remains one of the most remarkable ones in the field of international human rights protection. Van der Stoel served as the OSCE High Commissioner for National Minorities, a role in which he was the driver behind the link between protecting the rights of national minorities and conflict prevention. Van der Stoel's work laid the groundwork for peace by addressing the tensions that often divide societies. His legacy is an unwavering commitment to human dignity. Besides his work as High Commissioner, he was also the Dutch Minister of State and the UN Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iraq. But for us here at Tilburg Law School, his significance is not only on the international plane as a diplomat or as a politician, he was also a professor of international and European law at our Tilburg Law School. He helped shape generations of students and scholars. His contribution to the academic community is both intellectual and moral. He taught that law must serve people, that the practice of human rights requires both expertise and empathy, and that scholarship, when done with integrity, is in itself a social contribution. So the award that we will present today aims to honor that legacy, to celebrate human rights research and societal impact. Human rights research can help inform policies, it can expose hidden abuse, and it can ask the difficult questions about responsibility and accountability. So later today, we will hand out awards to excellent human rights researchers for their contribution to that body of scholarship. But before we do that, I would like to turn to our keynote speaker of today. It is my privilege to introduce someone whose work is an example of the connection between scholarship and societal impact, Professor Conny Rijken. Professor Rijken is the Dutch National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Human Beings and Sexual Violence Against Children. Since 2022, she has led national efforts to uncover the realities of trafficking and child sexual violence within the Netherlands, reminding us forcefully that human rights violations are not relics of the past, nor distant problems occurring only elsewhere. They occur close to home, sometimes in plain sight, affecting some of the most vulnerable people among us. As a scholar, Professor Rijken is a professor of human trafficking and globalization at Tilburg Law School, and she is an international leader in the field. Her research spans labor exploitation, corporate accountability, migration, and the lived experiences of victims. She also serves as the president of GRETA, the Council of Europe monitoring body on anti-trafficking efforts, further demonstrating her commitment to ensuring that evidence-based research informs concrete policies and practice. In her keynote today, Victimmigration, Human Trafficking in the Context of Migration, Professor Rijken will explore the complex and often invisible links between migration routes, vulnerabilities, and exploitation. We are very honored to have her in our midst here today, and there will be some possibilities after the keynote to ask some questions to Professor Rijken. So please join me now in inviting Professor Conny Rijken to the stage.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Yes, it's on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Nicola. And it is an honor for me to give the Max van der Stoel Human Rights Lecture today. And it is indeed about victimmigration, and I'll find the clicker. Victimmigration, human trafficking in the context of migration. So what I would like to explore with you is not only the concept of victimmigration, but also look into a specific case that is now pending before the court of Zwolle, the criminal court, and it concerns the victimmigration in Libya. And that is actually to give more picture and to paint actually the picture of what victimmigration entails. It is not a positive story, it is a very sad story, and that also follows from where I want to start with, and that is a song by one of the survivors of human trafficking, and I think this song gives a good impression of what he experienced. Well, the reason why I wanted to play this song is because he is a survivor. So this is the story about Mugisha. He wrote this book and he wrote this song as well. And he dedicated this song to all the victims of human trafficking and all the survivors of this cruelty. And also because he is now working for a support organization here in the Netherlands. It's called Lumens. It's in Eindhoven, which also shows the resilience of the person. So even if you are vulnerable, even if you have experienced the most cruel things, then you can get over it, and there is a new life ahead. So there is also some positivity and a life after that, and that is what he in his story shows. And I can really recommend you to read the book. It's a very interesting story, also to better understand what people go through in the migration, because it is a story that is often untold, sometimes because we still don't know, and sometimes because we do not want to know, because it is beyond our imagination. But it's important to take note of that. And that's also why I have chosen to inform you about that today, and to choose the topic of this lecture of the victimmigration. So victimmigration, that is, it's a concept. I will tell you a bit more later on that. But what we often do not know is what happens during the migration route. We know that people, well, they use smugglers. They often have to use smugglers or facilitators, depending on which lens you take to look at those persons. And sometimes you say, well, okay, well, these are criminals, actually. So many migrants, they need, who need international protection, they are dependent of those human smugglers. Is he okay, or yeah? Oh, okay, good, thanks. Yeah, I just yeah, okay. So, but we know that migrants are often in a very vulnerable position, and there are people abusing the vulnerable position during the migration. What I want to know is whether what they do and what's happening, whether that is also how that relates to human trafficking. And to actually give an answer to that question, we looked into a case, as I mentioned, that is now pending before the criminal court in Zwolle. It is a case in which the Netherlands cooperated with a number of other European countries, Spain, the UK, but also, for instance, with the International Criminal Court and with Europol, to collect information about these migration routes. It is very much, the most of the people are Eritreans that have given testimony in those cases. And what the modus operandi is that people, they go from Eritrea, flee Eritrea because of the totalitarian regime, through Ethiopia, and then from Ethiopia to Sudan and into Libya. Already sometimes in Ethiopia, they are recruited by facilitators or smugglers or traffickers, and then they are taken onwards. The journey from Sudan to Libya takes them through the desert, where they have a little water, little food, and this is a very dangerous route where they go through. If they then arrive in Libya to the place where they are kept by their smugglers, they end up in warehouses or places, sometimes detention centers, where they are locked up, and that is where the persons in this criminal case testified on. We have, with my team, we have analyzed 124 of these testimonies, of these statements of the victims, to see actually whether what they are saying, what they experience, whether that qualifies as human trafficking or not. Because in this criminal case, they are not prosecuted for human trafficking, they are prosecuted for human smuggling, for torture, for rape, for kidnapping, for all these crimes, but not for human trafficking. And of course, that triggered my attention and also the question whether this could qualify as human trafficking or not. And this is what we thought is relevant also for the modus operandi, apart from this whole transport and situation where they go through. So they are locked up in the warehouses where they have to beg for ransom. So they have to pay for the smuggling, they have to pay for being transported, and of course they have to pay back. Well, how do they pay back to the smugglers? That is to beg and to call family members or to call people in the diaspora and to beg them to send money. This is not going through a bank transfer, but this is done through a banking system called Halawa, where it is transferred hand by hand from one person to another, and finally there is a code that is given to the smugglers so that the smuggler know that the money is paid for that particular person. So they are, while they are forced to call with their family members or call with people in the diaspora, especially in Western European countries, they are often beaten and they are abused, they are threatened with that and further abused. There in those camps, there is strict control. They are sometimes with hundreds of people in these warehouses where there is little sanitation, little food, little water, and these are the circumstances under which they have to survive, sometimes for a number of years. There is also sexual harassment, kidnapping, commodification of persons. Sometimes, if they have paid off their debt or they have paid to be released, they are handed over to another smuggler, and then, of course, they think that they are going to continue their journey to Europe. But instead of that, they then end up in a similar situation, or in some of the cases, the first smuggler then takes them back and then again starts all over again. So that is what we mean with the commodification of persons. So they trade in persons from one smuggler to another smuggler. Now in this joint team that was set up with these countries, by the way, also Ethiopia is involved in this joint team. Well, they said, okay, well, these are practices that we cannot turn a blind eye to. So we have to take action collectively together with these other states, and that's why they started. And I think it's already 5 years ago that they started these to research this situation. And finally, they have now arrested, or they are prosecuting in total 9 people, but 2 of them are actually the main suspects, and that is the case that was over the last 2-3 weeks that was ongoing in Zwolle. One of them is already in the Netherlands. The other one is detained in Dubai. And, well, of course, the public prosecutor hopes that he will be transferred or extradited to the Netherlands soon to stand trial. So this is the modus operandi. This is how these practices take place. And only sporadically you hear about these situations in the media. And it's not an exception. So we have now looked into the route from Eritrea to Libya, but also from Western African countries, the same modus operandi takes place. So they come in also from Tunisia, they come also in from Algeria, in Libya, where there is actually, where these practices take place. So, of course, I always say, well, the Netherlands should be proud also of the prosecution service that they take up this case, because it's not easy. And it takes a really big effort from the prosecution service to build such a case, but also to bring it before the judge. And of course, we are very curious to know what the judge will finally decide on this case. So not for human trafficking, but the question, of course, that we wanted to know was, would it qualify as human trafficking? So for instance, in future cases, or maybe in other countries where people are prosecuted, could that then be prosecuted as human trafficking? Well, the human trafficking, there's 3 elements that are important. First is the act, and the act means that there is a process of recruitment, of accommodation, or transportation. That is the first element. Well, in this case, it is obvious that there we can tick the box easily. Then the second element is the means element, and that's very broad. That relates to force, violence, but also, for instance, the abuse of a position of vulnerability or misleading. Well, here we can also easily tick several of the boxes. And then the purpose of exploitation. Well, of course, from a more distant level, we can say, well, it's obvious that making money by abusing the migrants is the aim of the smugglers. But is that also exploitation? And exploitation is quite a difficult concept. Well, Nicola mentioned that I was already working for quite some years on human trafficking. We still do not have a clear definition on what exploitation is. So we still try to find some parameters to define exploitation. But we have also been given some guidance on the international level. So here is what the international scene says what exploitation is. And this comes from the convention, the Palermo Protocol. It's the Protocol on Human Trafficking, and it's a protocol to the UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime. And this is actually the leading definition for human trafficking, and also the leading document where about 180 states are party to. So really the large majority of the countries have ratified the protocol. And this is what the protocol says what exploitation is. So at a minimum, the exploitation of prostitution of others, sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Now, in the context of the European Union, we also have some others, so for instance, forced marriage, exploitation in surrogacy, that's now also included under exploitation. So you see that also on the international level, we are not clear what this exploitation would mean. Now the question is whether it qualifies as one of the practices mentioned here. And yes, we here also have ticked several of the boxes, actually many of the boxes. Together with my colleague Mirjam van Rijssen, she's from TSHD, so from the School on Social Sciences here. We have researched these Eritreans. Sorry, Jan.
It's humanities and digital sciences.
Humanities and Digital Science. Thank you, Jan. So the School on Humanities and Digital Science, I knew there was something digital in it. We have, previously we have looked at these practices and where we identified a new form of exploitation, new form of trafficking, which we then coined as trafficking for ransom. Well, what the case is in the trafficking for ransom is these situations that I just mentioned, where people are tortured, people are ill-treated, forced to beg for money to people in the diaspora. And we called that trafficking for ransom. Now, until recently, this was actually a more scientific concept, or a new concept that was mentioned only in literature, not only by us, but also by other scholars. But earlier this year, there was a case in the UK for the administrative court, and that was quite interesting because there was a victim, a person from Syria, who also went through this route through Libya to the UK. And in the UK, you can be granted the victim status if you are a victim of human trafficking. This person was denied this victim status, and he appealed, or he complained about the denial of this victim status. And then the administrative court looked at this situation and said, well, this falls within human trafficking. This is a form of trafficking, which is trafficking for ransom. So this was actually the first time that it was recognized also by a court that these practices are labeled as a form of human trafficking and are labeled as trafficking for ransom. So, well, that was quite innovative and also quite important to me, to us, and I think other forms of exploitation also occurs. So the forced begging, that is also easily recognized in those practices, but also criminal exploitation. If they have to torture, because there's also sometimes they are used to also torture other persons, then it's a situation of criminal exploitation, also labor exploitation, and there are indications of sexual exploitation there as well. And the concept of slavery. Here it says slavery still exists. Yes, it does still exist. Slavery as such, so we know slavery in the context of the Slavery Convention as that a person has the legal ownership over another person. Well, that was abolished some 25 years ago in Mauritania. That was the last country where they had still slavery as a possibility to legally own another person. But nowadays we do not have that anymore in the world. That does not mean that we do not have slavery, because slavery has a distinction between de jure and de facto. So if you behave as if you own a person, you sell a person, you determine what this person can do, where the person can go, and what to do, then you behave as if you are the owner of a person. And then this qualifies also as slavery, namely the factual form of slavery, de facto slavery. And that is also, that in international law and in human rights law, that is very well recognized, that you have these two forms of slavery. And here, as I mentioned, these practices where the persons are then handed over to another smuggler or are brought back from the other smuggler to again put you in debt, these are situations that we qualify as slavery. And then the slave trade, that is another factor that we also saw, and that is putting the people at risk of slavery. By the way, and we do not, in our national criminal code, we do not have slavery as a separate crime, which is, I think, a very a missed element, and which should be actually repaired in our criminal law, not to have slavery as a crime in our criminal code. We do have slave trade, but not slavery as such. So yes, there is, in my view, and actually also in some of the prosecutors' view, there is reason to prosecute future cases also for human trafficking. And that makes a difference. Why is that important? Also in the context of human trafficking, the victim protection is stronger and has a specific rulings. And it's also a recognition of the plight of these victims. So putting this in the broader perspective and then turning to actually the title of the lecture, victimmigration is also quite a new term. The victimmigration means actually the victimization during migration. Now, having heard these practices, in this case, there is a lot of victimization during the migration. And it can be, you can be a victim of a crime, but it can also be a victim of the abuse of power. And that is more related to the behavior of the state. The victimmigration, the terminology is very related to the term crimmigration, where we see a conflation between criminal law and migration law. And one could say that actually victimmigration is a species within the context of crimmigration, where you have also a conflation between criminal law and migration in some aspect, but then from a victim's perspective. And there, of course, is where human rights also comes into play if we look into the rights of the victims. Now, how does this take place during the whole flow of migration? So in the pre, peri, and post-migratory phase. By the way, we are also doing research on this concept of victimmigration together with my colleague Mario Braakman and Regina, where we have a project on how the victimization exactly takes place. But if we look in the vulnerabilities and the situation, the link to human trafficking before the migration, then of course it is often in situations of war or in situations of conflict where the vulnerability increases. If you have left everything behind and you have nothing more than what you're wearing, then you are more vulnerable to an offer or to suggestions to leave. And that is what we also sometimes refer to as survival sex, what is, and that is researched very much by a French sociologist, Olivier Pirou, who coined that and looked into those practices. If you do not have anything with you, if you do not have any money, then only what you can do is selling your body if you need to feed the mouth of your children, for instance, and you are on the way. Another factor, what we often see, is the debt bondage that takes place before people leave their country, which they also, of course, they have to pay back in a certain moment this debt, and that makes them also vulnerable to accept offers that they normally would not accept. But also during the migration, well, we have heard the story of what is happening in Libya. That is the dependency on the smugglers, the facilitators, but also when you run out of resources and money while you are migrating. and then after the migration. So if you come here, and especially if you, for instance, read the book of Mogisha, he very well explains and describes how he was again exploited when he was in Italy, and how he was again exploited when he came to the Netherlands. He did not have a status. And there were a lot of people that wanted to make a profit out of him, either sexually or in work, or he had to force to sell drugs, for instance. So it is very complex. So even after the migration, it is not over. And there is a need to pay off the debts. So all in all, this is, there are many vulnerabilities here in this concept, in this, during the migration. Now, what would that mean for the vulnerability, and how do vulnerability theories help us actually understand, or also help us to decide where to put the focus on? And especially Martha Feynman's theory on vulnerability, that is, of course, well, I see my colleagues from criminal law department smiling. So this is the concept that we use in the criminal law department to understand the vulnerabilities, but also to criticize and also see where the limitations are. So she's very critical to a more individualized approach to human rights. So she is more for the in favor of the collectiveness and the individual approach for human rights is too limited and does actually not address or put attention to the specific vulnerabilities of persons. And the social justice concept is for her more, that represents the collectiveness more for her. But she's also very critical to how societies are organized and what societies need to do and what they must do. So the organization of societies that is actually excluding people, and the way the societies are organized by that exclusion, which can be discriminatory impact on a person's vulnerability. What she advocates for is the legislative and administrative set of decision-making ethics. Well, that is a bit vague and high over, maybe, which indeed is. But this is fueled by the social justice at the center. And what is interesting is that she requires the state to act, to take an active approach instead of refraining from activity. And here you actually see back the divide in human rights law between the economic, social, cultural rights, where there is more an active involvement of the state, and the economic and the social and the political and the political rights, where the state really needs to refrain from any activities. So that is quite interesting, that she really puts the state in position to act. If we now link it to human trafficking, then we see that many of the vulnerabilities in human trafficking indeed originate from this economic, social, and cultural rights, or the lack thereof. So the vulnerability to exploitation and trafficking has some of the important elements thereof are the social, economic, labor and immigration laws and policies. So here you see also the obligations of the state reflected on economic, social and cultural rights. In general, there is three levels of, three categories of vulnerabilities that we can distinguish. So one is the personal, so what your age whether you're healthy or not. So your personal inherited factors that can make you vulnerable or not. But this can also, for instance, be your characteristics. Are you a thrill-seeking person or not? Or do you see everywhere, are you a more cautious person that does not take any risk? So also these factors are important if we look into the personal situation. And maybe a small anecdote of a research that I previously did in Thailand with colleagues from statelessness, where we looked into the link between statelessness and human trafficking. And we looked into it was in the north of Thailand, where you have the hill tribe communities, and most of them are stateless. And we wanted to know why certain people were more vulnerable to become victim of human trafficking and others were not, because they were all stateless. So if we say that statelessness is a trigger factor or an important factor, then why one person would become a victim of trafficking and the other not. And then we saw actually a toxic mix of these three elements, where also the personal situation, whether a person says, and when there is an opportunity offered, that person says, well, yes, let's go. Yes, we go to Bangkok. We see what happens to us, and it's exciting. Whereas other people, they say, well, okay, but if we go to Bangkok, how do we get there, and who's paying for it, and where do we sleep? And so that is also the character of a person is a factor that plays a role. But also the situational, the circumstances. What is your situation at that moment? Do you have a job? Or if you lose your job at a certain moment unexpectedly, or if your house is on fire, for instance, or you need an acute an amount of money to pay for a surgery, for instance, that also puts you at risk in these situations. And then the contextual and more systemic factors is more on the macro level. What is the policies? What Feynman refers to as how the society is organized. And of course the intersectional factors, and these factors also interact with each other. Well, the good news is that many of those vulnerability factors are temporary factors. And that is also what we heard in the song of Mugisha, and that is also what we can learn from history, that it can be overcome. Even if you have experienced the most cruel situations, you can overcome these situations, and there is a new life ahead. But then we need to see, and we need to understand. So we also need to change our willingness to understand. And this is also very well written in this PhD thesis from Morgana Wirtz. They don't think we are human, which means that, well, they actually do not see us. So there is also for us, all of us, a job to do to better understand what these migrants have gone through. To conclude, so what happens during the migration remains a blind spot. And here we need to change our own perspectives. And also understanding the vulnerabilities at all these stages are a crucial first step. First, to recognize victimhood, to understand where the vulnerabilities are, and to also understand that it is that people are resilient and can overcome. And last but not least, also to have some criminal justice. And that is, I think, very beautifully shown in this case that is now pending before the court in Zwolle. So finally, some positive notes in this sad story. Thank you so much for joining me. And I haven't got a clue about the time, but...
We have 10 minutes for some questions, and I'm sure there are questions. Thank you so much for offering this insight into what you deal with on a daily basis. And I'm sure there are some people in the audience that have a question for Professor Rijken. I'm going to give you the microphone because there is a recording and then they can hear the question.
Sorry?
It's being recorded, so you have to use the microphone to ask your question.
You want somebody to talk? Okay. I don't mind. I have only one question. When do you expect that this crime will finish?
Well, that's an easy question because I don't think it will finish. Yeah, I'm not optimistic about that. If you see also the progress that we are making, which is very, very slowly, then I'm not so very optimistic that it will finish.
And who is responsible for finding a solution for this poor people?
Who is responsible for finding a solution for these people? I think so. I think we all have something to do. And that is also what I mentioned with, okay, we also have to change our view and we have to look the persons in the eye. And that's also what Mogishu said. Well, look at me as a person. Look at not as a migrant on the whole, but look at me as a person and try to understand or at least listen to what I have to say and how and learn from it. So that is one. Of course, there is. I think that the Netherlands, by having this criminal case before the ordinary court in Zwolle, is a very important step. Also to show the outside world that we do not turn a blind eye. So that is also very important. And then, of course, it's also the international community that should take action there because, well, the situation in Libya is a very difficult situation. But also, for instance, the EU, if there is still countries that try to close agreements with countries that are not upholding the human rights for their migration control policies. That is, I think, a very dangerous route. So we also need to, and we need us to give that message, to bring that message across.
Yes, I have two more questions here. I'll give you the floor first, and then Professor Heersen.
Conny, thank you very much. I recognize some of the things we did together also with Miriam when we had the conference on Mariage Lompé. One thing I can understand of the people who are involved in this, they want to make money. But what I don't understand is why this cruelty is combined with it. Do you have any idea or theory about that?
Yeah. Well, that is also when we did the research on irritant, that was surprising us because it's actually a very sadistic way of adding already to the harm that is being done, adding extra harm. Well, it fuels their policy to make money because it gives some urgency if they call their family, their relatives, if they are so badly treated and if they really are screaming through the phone and people hear that. So that makes people in the diaspora more willing to pay the money. But there is also an aspect that I have the same curiosity as you have. So that is not, from our perspective, understandable, or that you can say, okay, well, they do it for this purpose. That is a more, and we labeled it then as from a more sadistic way of adding further harm to those people. And we know, well, unfortunately, also from other examples that people are able to do that. Yeah, unfortunately.
Many thanks, Conny, for your very important observations on this challenging question, which continues to exist over the years. Now, one of your observations was that after migration, those who are undocumented are extremely vulnerable. Now, at present, a bill is pending, as we all know, before the Senate, which makes undocumented stay in the Netherlands a crime. Do you agree with me that that would further deteriorate their situations and make the situation of vulnerability even worse?
No, absolutely, and that is also the message that I, as a national rapporteur, have commented on the bill, on this proposal, because we know that people do not want to come forward. They are afraid to come forward. They are they do everything to remain under the radar already now. If we make it a crime, that will even be more the case. If they run the risk of being prosecuted, arrested, because they are undocumented or without, then that willingness to come forward with what they experience further diminishes. So yes, we are very worried. I'm very worried about this bill, but it's even a bit more complex. And if we look into the human trafficking, if you are compelled to commit crimes in the context of human trafficking, then the non-punishment principle applies, which means that for those crimes you cannot or you should not be prosecuted or punished. Now this is actually in conflict a bit with the proposal that is to criminalize the illegal status of a person. And at this very moment, there have been questions posed because there is a reform. Sorry, it's a long answer, but it's a reform of the legislation on human trafficking that is now pending before the first chamber, for the Senate, and there have been questions on this particular aspects. So the minister will, well, at some point, also provide an answer to these questions. So we will hear a bit more about how this, well, the clash or the conflict or the potential conflict actually is between this non-punishment principle, which is also now being codified in the new legislation on human trafficking, so Article 273F, and this new proposal for criminalizing illegal stay.
I've seen 2 more hands for questions, and I'm sure there are many more, but we will close the program with drinks, so I think there will be ample opportunity to, in a more informal setting, ask all your questions to Conny, but I will just give the floor to 2 more that I saw their hands, and the others, I'm afraid I'm going to send you to the drinks afterwards.
Well, it's not too bad, though.
Thank you very much. I don't really have like human rights backgrounds, but I wanted to ask, what is the real difference between, you call it, I believe, I've taken notes, just a minute. Yeah, de facto slavery and then forced labor, because sometime in the context of labor law, you can have an employment contract, but then the person is not paid anymore, and still, because they have migrated, they have to work and they are under pressure by the employer. So is that forced labor? Is that de facto slavery? And the other thing, the other question that I wanted to ask was, is de facto slavery a real crime recognized at the European level? And if so, in which country?
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. That is another. So it's actually a gliding scale. So slavery is that you exercise all rights over a person, which means that the person has nothing to say about where the person lives, where to sleep, when to eat, what to work, what to earn, etc., etc. So that is the full scope of slavery. if we talk about forced labor, it is related to labor. And that is also by the European Court of Human Rights. It's actually quite well distinguished in the case law of Celia Dain of 2005, where there was a Congolese girl brought to France, where she had to work day and night, take care of the children of the family where she was living in. And there the court said, okay, well, is this servitude? Is this forced labor? Is this slavery? And they made it very clear what distinction between those three is. So if it is only related to work, that's your rights are diminished or denied, then we talk about forced labor. But in practice, this picture, of course, is not often so clear-cut. But at least conceptually, we have this distinction. De facto slavery is indeed recognized. So if you behave as if you are the owner of a person, that is recognized as slavery. And actually, in many countries, they use the concept of slavery. For instance, in the UK, there is where they actually frame it as modern slavery. So there you have the Modern Slavery Act, which human trafficking falls under. So there are, and especially more in common law countries, so also in the US, they are more in favor of using the concept of modern slavery, which then refers to de facto slavery.
Okay, and then one final question, a brief question, I hope, because I've now promised these drinks, so we have to...
Thank you so much. Thank you, Conny, for your clear talk about this important problem. I recall something more than 30 years ago as a psychiatrist. A few of the first female patients of mine came from Nigeria, from Edo State. And I know you're familiar with the situation that human traffickers entered the villages. They scouted young girls, brought them to the Netherlands. They did a voodoo ritual in which they were forced to pay back that trip to those smugglers. And in the Netherlands, they did not go to a hotel or a restaurant, or they were forced into prostitution. That situation was over 30 years ago. And there was even back then a monograph written by the University of Leiden by anthropologists who depicted the whole situation. Everything was already very clear. However, how is it possible that even today that practice still exists? Is it so difficult in international law to punish people responsible for that? Why is it so difficult?
Yes, so this specific, because I know the research from Van Dijk, who did that research by then on these practices of voodoo, which also very much informed the Netherlands and also the police, the prosecution, the whole criminal procedure of these practices. And with this voodoo, it is indeed a ritual that takes place in Nigeria. There is an agreement clause, and then they often have an amulet, for instance, in a necklace or something that reminds them of this agreement. And if they break that agreement, then evil falls upon this person. For us, it is, with our Western way of thinking, it is quite difficult to understand that can occur anxiety, and that incurred this this fear of people. We had a case which is called the Colvis case, where there was a very close collaboration between the Dutch prosecution service and with Nigeria, which was very exceptional. And it was based actually on this protocol and the accompanying UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, because otherwise we do not cooperate so much with Nigeria. But in this case, we cooperated. What was also interesting in this case, because of this voodoo element, a voodoo priest was called in to repair actually the fact that this agreement was closed or was broken. So he said, well, okay, there is no consequences because there's bad intentions, and because it came from a voodoo priest, it had also an impact on these people. That was used, and finally, in this Colvitts case, it was there were convictions take place. These situations are very difficult to detect because the unaccompanied minors, because most of them from Nigeria were minors, came to the Netherlands, made use of the special facilities for undocumented minors, and then left. And people do not know where they are going. By the way, there's almost every day one undocumented migrant disappears in the Netherlands. Can you imagine? Do you hear about that? No, we do not hear about that. So it's still going on. If you look into what the numbers within the European Union, then it's really massive. Europol has already 5 years ago say there's 10,000 undocumented migrants that were once registered that have now disappeared. What we did, what has been done in this joint team that is already taking place for 5 years. Now there's 2 cases in the Netherlands, and there are some cases. We need to have a different look into how to collect the evidence. With a normal criminal investigation, we will not detect these cases. And also my predecessor, so Herman Bolhaar, already advised the government to have a different look into these practices, because we know these networks still exist. But you need a lot of capacity. You need to talk to these people more openly, and not only because you need to have evidence for a criminal case, but you first need the willingness to understand what is taking place before you can then bring it to the court. And that is what they have done in this case that is pending in Zwolle, but it is not done. And people are under the radar, they do not want to come forward, they are not motivated, and they are afraid of these networks, because these networks, we know that, are really, really violent, especially those from Nigeria.
Okay, thank you. Please join me in thanking Professor Rijken once again for her fascinating.